Namaskar, viewers. Welcome to this exciting show. Hare Krishna, Jai Jagannath, and many of you are watching for the first time. And I really welcome all of you who have come today to join us. The the oldest scriptures in the world are Vedic scriptures, and they have their own timelines, and which is very different than Gregorian calendars. Now, these old calendars are based on different standards set up by different rishis and munis at different times. But most importantly, they follow the movement of the moon, and which is responsible for all the vegetation on this planet. There are many factors to that, scientific reasoning to that. In the last session, with this very famous guest of mine and a good friend, we had discussed about the calculation of days, like how Monday comes after Sunday. And that show, though some of you watched it live, but the recording will be out tomorrow. It's already scheduled as a premiere. Uh, Now, in this session, we are going to go back and touch upon the Yuga calculation. So, without delay, let us welcome Shri Nilesh Oak.
Namaskar, Namaskar Aditya ji.
Namaskar. So this Yuga calculation, I think Yuj Dhatu and the Yuga calculation, Yuga, Yoj, Yog, Yuj, all these things are very scientific and intriguing also. Because some people, they divide by 1,000, this divide by this thing, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's how they come to. And some people have reached the wrong conclusion also that Kali Yuga is long over. And where we, according to us, we think Krishna Sudham Pagate, when Krishna left the planet, is Kali Yuga and started. This is as per the Shastra. So now everyone is waiting for Kalki Avatar, and there was an interesting episode. Someone told me that Venkatesh is Kalki, and then some people, and there are 500 different people right now roaming on cycles, rickshaws, and all kinds of things, and all of them claiming to be Kalki. So, and people have an interesting notion that at the end of the Kali Yuga, Kalki will come. But his actions, if people hear about it, then people will not wait for that avatar. Because he's not going to give pravachan, no, under the tree. He'll be come on a white horse with a sword and kill anyone who sees in front of him. So now, that's why I think people are trying to calculate too much about Kali Yuga in one way, some people. And some people don't know how to calculate. So that's what we start. So what is your viewpoint on this?
Okay, so thank you. One thing is true for almost all of us is no matter which side we are on in this whole Yuga discussion, we are affected by it. We are affected because what we believe in our subjective conviction, or we are affected because of the people surrounding us and what they believe in their subjective conviction. Okay, so we are affected by it. So I think it's a subject that is worth discussing. So let's start with the time, the Yuga. Okay, so if we look at the Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, the Trimurti of Sanatana Dharma. So the Vishnu is that Vish Dhatu, the Sanskrit word Vish Dhatu is the expansion, it's like contain or it's expansion. And so that's like, that's the protection aspect of the divine. And that's where, the Vishnu protects, Vishnu protects, that's what we say. Now Shiva's aspect, many times we say he's a destroyer. Destroyer is a wrong word. Dissolution is somewhat better, but the best word is a unification. Okay, unification in the sense, just to give a metaphor, and it comes from Ishavasya Upanishad. It's the sun rises in the morning, it's totally dark, and sun comes in the morning, and it spreads its rays all over. And people get up, the birds start flying, human beings get up, the cows get up, and the activity begins. And as if like at the end of the day, when the sun is setting, sun is like drawing all its rays into itself, into himself, so to say. So that's like a unification. So the role of Shiva is that of unification. It's not a destruction, it's a unification. It's like dissolution, again to rejuvenate and start the creation. So if this process is eternal, at least in a Sanatana Vedic Dharma, that process is without any end. So to represent that, I will say what we have is a Mahakal in Ujjain. Mahakal is going from minus infinity to plus infinity, or plus infinity to minus infinity. So that's given. In fact, Surya Siddhanta talks about this. Surya Siddhanta says there are 2 or 3 types of time, and Bhagavad Puran also talks about different times, right? It will talk a lot about the time, Bhagavad Puran, and finally it will say it is really achintya. It's not very easy to truly comprehend what the time is, and it is a representation of Bhagwan and so on, right? That's what it will end up. But Surya Siddhanta also says the same thing. But then it says there are 3 types of times. One is, of course, the one that we can sense it, we can intuitively feel it, but we cannot measure. Think of that as a Mahakal, minus infinity to plus infinity, eternity, so to say. Okay, that's one. Now, the second aspect that can be divided into 2 according to Surya Siddhanta. And it says anything like from a prana, like, I take a deep breath and let it go. So if I do it in a normal time, normal way, then that is a prana. And then there are measurements going up to the day. He says that's a measurable time. That is a murta time. And there is something called amurta time, which is going below that, like a truti. And last time we also talked about, or maybe previous time, a truti and kshana and all that, it goes down. Okay, that's like it's the amurta time. It is there, but it cannot be perceived, easily perceived. Okay, so that's sort of like how we can deal with the time. But one interest, so that's okay. There are different definitions, and we will talk briefly about those. But what has happened, and it's very unfortunate, is that while the concept of yuga, and you explained beautifully, it is to connect, just the time also can be discrete, but time is also continuous. So the concept of yuga is used in many different fashions. There are multiple different definitions in our ancient narratives. I have a blog on my blog site, nileshoak.wordpress.com. And what I have given the title, I have said the naughty yuga, or something like that. The knots in the yuga and a naughtiness of yuga. Because we have made a mess out of it. My severe objection is for these subjective convictions that people carry, unfortunately, is that they will stick to one very specific definition of a yuga, and simply because they read it somewhere, they heard it somewhere, their guru said it somewhere, and nothing wrong with it. But whichever source you hear it from, in our Bhagavad Puran talks about it, like you have to be your own guru too. Atmaiva guru atmaiva purushasya visheshata yat pratyaksha anumanabhyam shreyo savano vindate. That is 11th skanda, right? Pratyaksha anumana, you have to bring it together. You can be your own guru. So we have to qualify what we are saying. And today I want to describe the mystery of this 432,000 year as the length of Kali Yuga, or total of 4.32 million years as the length of a Mahayuga, and what is its true origin, and how it is my assertion that how it has completely been misunderstood, and that has created a havoc as far as understanding the history of Sanatan Vedic Dharma. Back to you, Aditya ji.
See, the krama of, or the sequence of avatar is extremely important for people who are on the spiritual path of it. And I think these questions are mostly asked by those seekers, I would call them. Whether you may be perfect, you may not be perfect, but the seekers actually go for this kind of deep analysis. Rest of the people are not care, do not care.
Correct.
They are happy with eating, sleeping, and enjoying their life, and
right.
Whatever they have to do. So, especially for the seekers, this calculation of yuga becomes very important, because maybe they want to see when the next avatar is coming. Maybe they want to predict like something or the other related to faith. I think that becomes more important. So therefore, the scientific understanding of calculation is important sometimes.
Correct. And as Krishna says, paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskrutam. So he also comes if there are sadhus to be saved.
Yes.
Right. So for Krishna to take avatar, there must be sadhus. Right. Otherwise, he may not care, right? Vinashaya Dushkritam, he said, let the Dushkritam do whatever they want to do if they are all that is left.
You
So,
interpreted it in a very nice way, because in Kali Yuga, the sadhus to find is very difficult. So the
right.
purpose of avatar also changes.
Absolutely. One of the professor, I mean, that I work with at the Institute of Advanced Sciences in Dartmouth, just south of Boston, Professor Balaram Singh. Now he says, who knows? Only in retrospect we might know that the corona might be an avatar of a different kind. Okay. And he was, by the way, you and me are laughing, but he wasn't kidding about it. It's like, Matsya Kurma Varahan Nrsimha Vamana Parshuram, it can come in any form for different reasons. But getting back to the serious thing, before jumping into that 4.32, I want to quickly also mention there are different aspects of this yuga. One is, so yuga is, in fact, let me get into this, let me get into because I have one slide, and can I share? Let
Yeah,
me
yeah, please go ahead.
start sharing. Okay. All right. So I just gave a title. I called it Astronomy Yuga versus Yuga Dogma. Okay. So that's just to get people's attention, but I think it's very, very important that we do it. All right. So the first slide, what I did, again, because that's what many people do. So I thought, let me do the same thing. So we at least start on the same page. If people want to know something, what they immediately do is go to Wikipedia. Okay. And as far as the Indian civilization, Sanatan Vedic Dharma is concerned, other than some very basic things that nobody wants to toy around, Wikipedia is not a good source. Okay. For ordinary things is fine, but otherwise it's an extremely vicious propaganda machine, which will not let you tell the truth of Sanatan Vedic Dharma. Okay. They will remove the postings. But what they have shown here is not bad. Okay, so I want to just share that with you. A yuga is, in Sanatana Dharma, it says a large period of time. It's any specific period of time. Okay, that's the definition that you will find in our ancient narratives. Okay, as it relates to the past, present, and future. Mostly typically divided into 4 types of yuga. That's very, very common, the Chatur Yuga. And in terms of the context, depending on the context, its length, what it is, what a yuga is, can change. It may refer to season, it may refer to generation, it may refer to reigns, meaning the ruling of a certain king. It may refer to kalpas, stage of creation, 1,000-year period, or something like this. And on this, I want to briefly say that so yuga is a period of time, a unit of time. But beyond that, it has been perceived in many, many different ways. For example, as a state of mind. Okay, so or as an indicator to decide what kind of ruler you have, what kind of administrator you have. Okay, so state of mind, for example, Aitreya Brahmana says, when you are sleeping, that is as if you are in a Kali Yuga. When you wake up but still sitting down, you are in a Dwapar. When you get up, stand up, you are in a Treta. And when you start walking, then now you are in a Kruta Yuga. And therefore, keep walking. Charayaveti, Charayaveti, Charayaveti. That's a Aitreya Brahmana. Or Mahabharata itself has like 5-6 different definitions of yuga in terms of the duration. Sometimes it says 1,000 years, sometimes 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and whatnot for each specific yuga. But it also gives a definition such as Raja Kalasya Karanam. And to support this definition, Adityaji, do you know what I will give 2 examples from Mahabharata. I might have given those examples before, but they are worth repeating. When Bhishmacharya was ruling, and Chitravirya and Vichitravirya were very young, and so Bhishmacharya was basically taking care of the Kuru kingdom. He was administrating the kingdom in such a beautiful way that Mahabharata says he brought Satya Yuga. So he brought Satya Yuga in otherwise a Dwapar Yuga. That's what you and me are going to accept. Or it says, Mahabharata says, when Parshuram, he got rid of the miscreants, he established Satya Yuga. And the same thing you hear in the Ramayana, that when Ram came back from Lanka and started ruling, he was ruling in such a nice way that he brought Satya Yuga. So this is all that I just stated from Mahabharata or Ramayana in support of Raja Kalasya Karanam. The king, depending on how he behaves and what kind of administration he brings into reality, a certain type of yuga is established. This is Bhishmacharya telling Yudhishthira many times. Okay. So that's the background. Now let's get into the 4.32 discussion. So for example, right from this Wikipedia, okay, this is a challenge and a problem of a formal reasoning. And what I mean by formal reasoning is a claim without any objectively testable evidence. It's like if somebody tells us, hey, this is the number I'm telling you, you trust me. There is no basis, no reference. What do we see? This is something we are very familiar with, Aditya ji, right? The Yuga cycle, 432,000 of Kali, twice that is a Dwapar, 3 times of that Kali age is that 1.296 whatever, million, and then 1.728 millions for Satya Yuga. If you add together, they are going to add up to 4.32 million. Now, how that is done, we will get back to that in a minute. The 12,000 divine years comes out, corresponds to 4.32 million human years. Okay, but this is not the only definition in vogue. This is the most common. Okay, and this is what people are usually stuck with. But let me ask you: have you heard the definition of? I think I have it here. Yes, Yukteswar, Swami Yukteswar,
Yes.
into his book Holy Science, right?
Holy Science,
where
yes.
where he proposed a concept. Again, it says a formal reasoning, meaning if you read the book Holy Science, he says it, but there is no basis. Basis in the sense he may have a basis, but it is not stated. It's like simply given. Hey, this is how it is. And so what there we are talking a total cycle of 24,000 years. Divide that into 12 and 12, and he's talking about a descending yuga cycle and ascending yuga cycle. Some aspect of it I actually like, and I'll tell you what I like about that. So for example, Satya Yuga, then Treta, then Dwapar, then Kali. So it's like a really degenerated timeline, let's say. Now when it turns around, what he's saying is it's not going to suddenly have a jump and suddenly the Satya Yuga comes, but he says, okay, now it starts improving. So it's like a cycle of civilization, going through very down periods and then slowly recovering, coming to better times and so on. But that's what he proposed. I'm just sharing it with you. I don't have any particular bias towards it. In fact, I tried to test this and it doesn't work for the timing that I have done, nor the first cycle. It also doesn't work, and I'll show you what that happens. But you know what? Many people took so much inspiration from this. This is Alan Danilo, like Hare Krishna devotees would be familiar with him. I think he has met Prabhupada, if I remember, the poet and whatnot.
Yeah.
So he developed his own Yuga cycle. And the reason and there is one more person there, and he developed his another one, just a difference of 4,800 between 60,000 versus 64,000. And again, one can go back and see what the logic was. I don't know what the logic is, but there are these different cycles. Okay. In fact, Aditya, this is not it. If you go to ancient Indian narratives, and I have that blog on the Yuga, the confusion of Yuga or something like this on my blog site, WordPress blog site. And I would encourage viewers to go read that. You will find multiple definitions, some close to 30 definitions, where a Yuga, the total Yuga I'm talking, not just one Kali Yuga, all the 4 Yugas occurring in 5 years, all 4 Yugas occurring in 12 years, or 60 years, or 1,000 years, or 3,600 years, or 12,000 years, like what we saw here, or 21,000 years, or 24,000 years, or 26,000 years. It's almost like, go to a market and pick what you want. Okay. That has created a lot of confusion. Okay. And so what happens? Why people pick a certain definition, certain particular definition? And then I get these questions like, because I have, so let me take you there. So because I have defined, I have established the timing of Mahabharata based on internal references to Mahabharata, not just astronomy, but hydrology, whatnot, to more than 7,500 years, 5561 BC, or for Ramayana, 12,209 BC. And then people naturally ask, how come between Treta Yuga and the end of Dwapara, when the Mahabharata war happened, only 7,000 years, like 12,209 versus 5561 BC? And I have given an answer in my frequently asked questions, my another blog on that site. So I will not elaborate on that. But let's focus on where does this 432,000, that number came from for Kali Yuga, and why we shouldn't take the way we are taking. Not we meaning it's not just something recently we did it in last 50 years. It is happening at least for, at least for 2000, 3000 years, maybe longer. Okay. So everyone is, you are Aditya familiar with this 4.32 million years
Yeah,
as
very
the
clear. Yes.
Mahayuga, right?
Yes.
Yuga or Mahayuga, right?
Kalpa,
This
Kalpa, one day
Kalpa.
of Brahma.
Right. No, maybe not. Huh? Maybe not. I don't know. But let's see. Let's see what
Yeah,
comes up.
you're right. One day of Brahma is into some billions of years.
Huh.
311.
Correct. Correct. Hmm? Uh, this one 4.32 is basically Kali Yuga, Dwapar, Treta, and Satya Yuga added together. Like 432,000, twice that. So 1 is to 3 is to 4. What is that? 1 is to 2 is to 3 is to 4 ratio. So Kali Yuga is a 1/10, which is that 432,000. If you multiply that 10 times, you get 4.32 million. And that will have all the 4 yugas. Okay. And now I want to show you the origin of that from Surya Siddhanta. And then I also quickly show you from Aryabhatiya. See, originally this number has purely astronomy basis, nothing else. Now, astronomy is of course for time calculation, that is given, but it has a very specific basis, and somewhere we don't know where, when, but that was misunderstood. So let me quickly, just to, before I quote from the Surya Siddhanta, I want to show you, just to give you a flavor of how old is Surya Siddhanta. Okay, this is just a timeline for last 22,000 years or so. And against that, if you look at the recent updates, not by recent I mean the updates in Surya Siddhanta that we have identified. When I say we, it means me, myself, Nilesh Oak, but also my co-researcher Mrs. Rupa Bhatiji or Dr. Anil Narayanan. So there may be many other researchers who might have done something, I don't know. But just between these three that I just mentioned, we have 6 updates. Okay, longitudes of nakshatra update in Surya Siddhanta in 580 C. That was 1500 years ago. That is that time of Ashwini as the first nakshatra, Revati where the year began, and so on and so forth. Or why we do Navaratra in Ashwini, or the Chaitra Mas is the beginning of the year. That began here around 580. The 2 pole stars, that is the paper I presented at Oxford a couple of years ago. That's where we showed there is a very specific update, okay, validated by multiple references from Surya Siddhanta, that happened 12,000 BC at the time of Ramayana. Okay, and it perfectly connects with the Ramayana. So that's that. I'm going to go fast through this. Latitudes of nakshatra, this is the work of Dr. Anil Narayanan. Goes back to 7,500 BCE, so almost like 9,500 BC, 9,500 years ago. Equation of the sun that we have currently in Surya Siddhanta is most accurate in 5,500 BCE, the timing of Mahabharata, just after Mahabharata. Okay, the obliquity of Earth's axis calculation is most accurate for 2,900 BC or 12,000 BC. And there is one that Abhijit reference again from Mahabharata that takes us to 14,500 BC. My point is, Surya Siddhanta is very ancient, very old, definitely more than 17,000 years old. And we were making corrections to Surya Siddhanta 17,000 years ago, which means it was in a perfect state if you have to go back another 20,000 years or so on and so forth. Okay, from that Surya Siddhanta, I am quoting here. Aditya ji, just now, before at the beginning, when I mentioned there are 3 types of time and that one time can be split it into Murta and Amurta, that is this verse from the Surya Siddhanta Madhyamadikar, this verse number 10. Okay, and I'll go fast through this. What this verse is saying is that our day is fine and our year is 365 days, but for the Devas, which is assumed as a North Pole, and Asuras the South Pole, for both of them, our whole year is like for them Aho and Ratro, because their day was assumed to be a day of 6 months and night of 6 months. Okay, so that's what this verse is saying. Then this is quickly giving you the length. And see what is the beauty. Why this number 4.32 million was selected is because that number allowed the astronomy text, the Indian astronomy text. And as you know, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was one who has also written a commentary on Surya Siddhanta. So what it does very efficiently, it allows us to define most complex numbers in astronomy in a very accurate and precise fashion. So without going into the Sanskrit of it or the complexity of it, these verses here from 29, 30, 31, 33, from this first chapter of Surya Siddhanta Madhyamadikar. Now I'm going to show you what this is saying, without going into the Sanskrit. What this is saying is on the next page. Okay, here are our planets. We are looking at the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. These are the visible planets to the naked eye. And then we have the moon apogee, the moon's furthest position from the earth, where that is, and that also moves. And then we also have the node, the moon's node, like a Rahu. In astronomy, by the way, there is no Rahu and Ketu. Okay, it is only astronomy, it is only Rahu, and both nodes are Rahu for that practical purposes. Okay, so now what I just showed you on this previous page in the Sanskrit verses, essentially I'm translating them for you into numbers here. What it is saying, because sun is the reference point, the ecliptic, the sun's path is the reference point in astronomy, and sun's rotation around the earth or earth's rotation around the sun, the same thing, is the reference point. That is that number 4.32 million, that is at the top. What it is doing is it is representing the rotations of all the other planets in the language of sun's rotation to be equal to 4.32 million. Okay, so what it is saying is, when sun makes 4.32 million rotations around the earth, this is an imaginary number. What I mean by that is, this is a number for calculation purposes. Okay, it's like saying 1 over 10 is same as 10 over 100, is same as 100 over 1000. Okay, just like a representation of a number. In that sense, I'm saying it's imaginary. And with respect to that number, what it says is, for when sun does 4.32 million rotations, moon actually does how many? You can see that number. It's even a bigger number, so I'm not going to read that. Moon's apogee does 488,203 numbers. Mercury will do whatever that 1.79 million number, whatever that, or more than that, by the way, 17 maybe. So it will do those many rotations. Venus will do so many, and so on. And what do we do with this? This is the beauty. We can now take the number here, that sun's number, rotational number, 4.32 million, divide that number by this number here to get the orbital period of that each planet. And if you multiply that by the year length, like 365, then you get the orbital period in days. And you get it very accurate to I'm showing you up to third decimal place, but actually it will, you can show it to the fourth, fifth, and sixth decimal place. Very, very accurate representation of the orbital period of the planets, okay, is achieved by using that reference number of 4.32 million.
And that's why on Earth they call it the fourth year as leap year with 366 days.
That is adjusted. That is adjusted here. Yeah, that is adjusted, right? Okay, but because we also Adhika Masa is adjusted and all of that, But what I want to show you is, now this is Surya Siddhanta, which is, we know that definitely it's older than 17,000 years old. Now compare that, the numbers given by Surya Siddhanta, and keep in mind that actually over time some numbers are changing. The Earth's orbital period is changing a little bit, Moon's orbital period is changing, and so on. But in spite of that, I want you to take the Surya Siddhanta numbers. So look at the last column and second last column. The last column is the orbital period number from modern science, from NASA, you can call it for simplicity. And do the comparison with what Surya Siddhanta has given. And just look at the amazing accuracy.
Yes.
Amazing accuracy of Surya Siddhanta, right? So to achieve that accuracy, the genius of Indian sages, Indian astronomers, was to take a number so large that the fraction doesn't cause the error in representation of the true orbital period of the planet. Okay, so that's why they chose that number. Okay, and then for different purposes they divided into this. For example, now when in what we know, we divide it, that 4.32 million, into the form of 1:2:3:4 as Satya, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali. But not astronomy necessarily. Sometimes they do, and other times the astronomer, I mean Aryabhatiya or many other Bhaskara and all that, they have divided this yuga in a different fashion. For example, Aryabhat divided it into four equal parts of 1 point whatever that million that it comes to. Okay, so they have done it for a different purposes. They have done it in a different fashion. So that's just quickly Surya Siddhanta I showed you. Now if you look at Aryabhatiya, and this is something that we are researching, and Aditya ji, I will share something with you, again not the details because we don't know the details, but while we think that Aryabhat wrote Aryabhatiya and it is from 1500 years ago, yes, he must have done something to it, but I mean, he didn't start from the scratch, and you will see why, because he also uses the same number as what is Surya Siddhanta uses, because there were many others, Pitama Siddhanta, right, Vasishta Siddhanta, there were 18 different astronomy Siddhanta. We are only left with the Surya Siddhanta and a few things here. They are using the same numbers, but what I'm saying is Aryabhatiya, we are actually finding the references, evidence that takes us into deep antiquity, Aryabhatiya. But that's not the subject again. What I'm saying is Aryabhatiya also uses the number of 4.32 million. And see the beauty, like last time, remember, we did the days of the week. And just in 2 lines, it describes the whole science of why the days are in that sequence, what is the logic behind it, how to assign each number to each planet and so on. Just now what you are saying, and I'm not going to even bother read that, actually that Gyukru, that number you see, or Chayagi Gishushu, these are numbers represented as letters. Okay, that's how these numbers are. And so therefore they like a Krichubha Kuja, I mean Kuja is that planet, of course, but these numbers, these two verses, again, just these two verses is saving what I'm showing you on the next screen here. That those two verses are saying everything that I am showing you here. Can you imagine this? How fascinating is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's saying these are the planets, this is the moon's apogee, this is moon's node. Again, it is giving as the first two columns really. The third column is calculated, and that's how it's supposed to be calculated. Again, the 4.32 million is a reference. The rotations of other planets for that during that period, during 4.32 million years, earthly years or sun's rotation, the rotations of other planets are given that allows us to calculate the accurate and precise orbital period for the planets. Again, just for a quick comparison, I'm saying that orbital period calculated from Aryabhatiya versus the orbital period from modern numbers. Very, 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 very accurate. I mean, you can see some differences, but now let's take some difference. For
So
example,
when we
let's
just a question
yeah,
here,
go ahead.
Nilesh.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
4.32 million years and 365.259. What we divided from 324.32?
What did we divide from?
432 to get 365.
360, that's a good question. I would have to go to my Excel thing. But for example, see, I'll tell you this number. Okay, so
Yeah.
that 365 is like defined as a before these two verses, it is defined as what is the time it takes for a sun to make a complete rotation around the earth. That is not given in the shlokas that I gave.
Yes.
But it's Surya Siddhanta also gives a number. Aryabhatiya also gives a number. The number is slightly different from each other. But once that is done, so this is my reference number that I use in my calculation actually. But then what I do is, for example, this number I get by taking this number, dividing this number by this number, and then so I will get a fractional year and multiply that by 365 to get me the orbital period of days. Okay, so I mean, I could have, I could have pulled the Excel. Now it will take time if I have to pull the Excel from
It's
somewhere.
fine.
Yeah, but what it is doing is taking this say Jupiter, for example, is taking this number, dividing that number by the Jupiter rotations. It is giving a number like how long in sun years or earth years Jupiter it takes Jupiter to make one rotation around, and then in a fractional year, then you multiply by the days of the year, and that gives you the rotational period in days, like in this case 4,332 days. That will come to around 12 years, for example. Or the Saturn will come to around 29.5 years, whatever those days. Now, so the great question. With the other point, so there is a specific definition, in each for the year. But the next, because their speeds are given. But the next point I want to show you is this, and we don't need to go into the details, but just for fun, the orbital period of Saturn is like here for Aryabhatiya is 10766 days, and modern calculation is saying it's a 10759 days. So there is a very small difference. There is a difference of say 7 days. Okay. Now, what somebody will say, oh, still very impressive. But somebody might say, oh, okay, so the Aryabhatiya is wrong by 7 days. Well, we don't know that, and that's a very important point to remember. I mean, his number is wrong, and that's possibility. But remember, we don't know exactly the time of Aryabhatiya, and especially we don't know these particular verses from Aryabhatiya were they composed during Aryabhatiya's time, or he was essentially taking whatever knowledge he had and was encoding into the verses. So this number could be actually very precise and accurate for another time, because these things are slightly changing. I mean, not to make a big fuss about the 7 days in 30 years. Okay, that's what we are talking. But it is that accurate. So my last slide quickly. So my point is, just like we are right now, we are in a computer days, computer age for last 30-40 years. And so if you remember the time, the kilobytes, and our viewers, some of the viewers, Swami Maharaj and all, they may also remember the floppy disk. And then we had a 3.5 megabyte, those other files, and we used to make a big deal about it. Oh, I have these files, some sophistication. And then we got into megabytes, then we got into gigabytes and made a big fuss about it. Oh, wow, I have GB memory and so on. And now we are talking terabytes, and I'm sure the next thing will come. So now that in terms of a memory, to keep track of it, we are using these different words, right? The gigabyte or terabyte or something like this. Similarly, the astronomical calculations, to preserve the accuracy and precision, therefore they use this big number. It was meant for mathematical calculation, but somewhere we got into taking this literally, like as if like that's the duration of a Kali Yuga, meaning the bad time that proceeds, or that's the timing of Dwapar Yuga. And based on my work, because this was at my heart, and actually in parallel, Aditya ji, with my association with Hare Krishnas, by the way, so like late 80s. Okay, in Mumbai, with the Mumbai Mandir. So that's where I got very fascinated with this Yuga business, I can say. And so since then I'm studying those. Quickly, just my books here, for reference. This is from India, and this is other from Amazon. And I'm going to stop sharing. This was my last slide.
I like what you put. Don't ask when and don't ask why.
No, you should ask questions. No, I wasn't ready with my Excel spreadsheet to show you that 365 days.
No, the book you have written, don't ask when it's coming, your new book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that one you mean. Well, I'll tell you why I wrote that down, because, and again, through this medium, I can hopefully those people who watch it, they will know it. See, many people do not realize that how few original researchers we have, or the hardworking people we have. I count myself among that small community, of hardworking researchers. And what happens is, many people don't realize how much it takes, how much work it takes. But on social media, Facebook, Twitter, email, they will send some really useless suggestions, or simply they will ask, they have no bad intention, but they will ask, "Acha, when aapka naya book kab aa raha hai? When is the new book coming? Where can I find this? Or where can I find your book?" Now tell me how difficult it is in these days. If you just go to Google and type the name, if they type Aditya Satsangi, they are going to get everything about you. They are going to get more than what you know about yourself, right?
True.
Yeah, so they shouldn't be spending time, and it doesn't help anyone, and then it doesn't feel good also that I'm not responding to them. So I think that's why I just get it. When I get a chance, I say, don't ask. There is no point. What am I going to say? Coming soon, right? So that's why I say. So anyway, so that's the origin of that 432,000 for Kali Yuga. After that, anyone has a freedom to use whichever way they want to use that number
Yes.
in their subjective conviction.
No, good, you added that caveat over there, subjective conviction.
Mhm.
But the slides that you show very convincingly put across the theory behind the 432 million year calculation as per Surya Siddhanta.
Mhm.
But if you look at the Avatara timeline,
Mhm.
and it is my question to you as well, is that very famous shloka Krite Yadhyayato Vishnum Tretaya Vijdo Makhe Dwapari
Mhm.
Parichayam Kaloto Dhari Kirtana. And also, so the Kali Yuga has been mentioned from the beginning of Krishna's disappearance on the planet,
Mhm.
and that's how that becomes the basis of other calculation of other yuga. Like the
Yes.
Ramayana's description of age is 24th Treta Yuga, and
Right.
Krishna's appearance is in 28th Kali Yuga. So
Yes.
which is also different, because
Correct.
the 14 manvantara are there. Each manvantara has 72 yuga, and
Yes.
which uh,
Yes.
which is a complete cycle,
Correct.
and that's how it makes up the 1,000 cycle for one day of Brahma, and
Right.
14 manu divided for 1,000 cycles.
Right. So what I'm saying is, what you are just saying, those are indeed a descriptions. Okay, indeed the descriptions. In fact, I can complicate the picture further with the manus. So like, I mean, you will help me. You will know more. But what is that? Some Savarni manu,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I have the
And
entire list. Yes,
right. And there's this Savarni, that Savarni manu, Meru Savarni, and all that. And if
Chakshusha.
yeah, and Swayambhu, right? Starting
Yeah.
with the Swayambhu all the way
Right
to
now, Vivaswat is ruling.
Vivaswat, right? But my point is, so that's why people ask, like what you just said, that Rama coming into the Treta of the 24th Yuga, Mahayuga, right? Whatever, and Krishna coming into the Dwapar of the 28th,
28th.
correct? So in between so many, so that's why people go for millions of years
Millions
for
of years.
Ramayana, for
That's right.
Ramayana. Yeah, so 7,000, they say, what are you talking, right? Only 7,000 year difference. Well, I don't know how to take those 24th I mean, what do you call, Manvantar, and 28th Yuga, or whatever that is, and to fit for my dates. I
Yeah.
don't know that. Okay, I don't claim to know. But this is what I will say, and this is what I say into my frequently asked question scenario. I said, look, I defined the timing of Mahabharata by reading the entire Mahabharata, extracting every single astronomy, hydrology, whatever geology reference, and it comes to 5561 BCE. Period. For Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana that I have access to, that every one of us has access to, I extracted close to 600 astronomy references. I put them together as a jigsaw puzzle. They take me to 12,209 BC. Then we have discussed on our previous shows. We have evidence for Yamuna meeting Ganga only after 50,000 BC.
Correct.
Satlaj turning west only after 15,000 BC. Sorry,
Easy.
15,000 BP, like 13,000 BC. And Ramayana talks about Yamuna meeting Ganga. Ramayana talks about Satlaj turning west, which means that Ramayana can happen only after that. Now, I did not try to fit Ramayana based on these descriptions. I just tried to derive it based on astronomy references, and these astrology references match. The Yuga references that you just spoke about do not match. Okay, but here is now what is the reality. The formal reasoning versus normal reasoning. The formal reasoning is a claim without evidence, and by evidence I mean, yes, it is there in the Bhagavad Puran or it is there in other Puranas, but we don't have any way to objectively test it.
Correct.
For example, if you want to say it, Dwapar Yuga was 864,000 years, just our past Dwapar. How do we confirm? I mean, how do we, is there, just like if we want to know the height of Jagannath Mandir, we can go to Jagannath Puri. We
Exactly.
can use the laser beam and measure it, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
how do we measure 864,000 was indeed the length of Dwapar Yuga? We have no way of doing it. But I am saying, on the other hand, the evidence that I'm saying why Mahabharata happened 5561 BC or Ramayana happened 12,209, it is there. I mean, for that, just like, that, I mean, I don't want to spend time showing my books, but like this book, at the end of it, you're going to see all the references, like all the references that I talk about, they are there. So unless there is a reference, I don't write a sentence. In So now we have a timing of these epics coming from the Valmiki Ramayana itself and Mahabharata itself. That is my claim, and I want people to critique it if they don't agree with it. But then on the other side, we have these descriptions of a yuga that do not match, which I agree, they do not match at all. But see, the onus is also on them to, for example, if someone says, so suppose Aditya ji, you say 24th Mahayuga or whatever Manvantar, and in that Treta Yuga, which goes back to say 9 million years. Now, fortunately, you will able to show the elephants with the four tusks in in that time, which is a good thing for you,
Yeah.
if it goes to 9 million years or whatever. But what about the other evidence? See, the astronomy evidence in Ramayana or even Mahabharata, that the current system that we are talking, that system simply will not work. We have to devise a totally different system if we go beyond 150,000 years from today. The current system of nakshatra with the specific stars and everything that is so well laid out, which is discussed in Ramayana and Mahabharata, is simply not there if you go back more than 150,000 years. You won't have a Saraswati if
Exactly.
you go back. So that's a challenge. Anyways, go ahead.
So might as well, I think it comes to a point where we need to read review the solar movements, because I think that's where, because if you change the model of calculation,
Mm-hmm.
then all these things fit, because the point of reference also changes. And so then we
Fine.
can,
Yeah. Go ahead. Go
but
ahead.
as long as we think of solar cycle as per the modern scientists, then exactly what you say is correct, because it doesn't go beyond it. But if you change the reference point from the solar system, from Vedic solar system, then everything changes, because then the perspective of Meru Parvat, which is in Kyrgyzstan. If you look at everything, then Duryodhan explains that Arjun has even gone to the place where in the valley the bamboos make sound, and I searched the
Ah,
entire planet,
yeah.
and I found that Mandrachal and the Meru Parvat is right in Kyrgyzstan today.
Mm-hmm.
About
Yes.
now, uh, if I call it Meru and other things, then again things change. Then after that,
Agreed. I agree with you, which means either we have to look at those definitions, say the astronomy model in a different fashion, as you are suggesting, or we need to go back and look at these definitions of the yuga cycles in a different fashion,
yeah,
right? Because what I did, see, I spent actually after reading Srimad Bhagavad, this Meru Savarni and all those, I tried to put together in a, in as a chronology, and sometime we will discuss it offline, or maybe if we can refine it. My thinking is not very clear. The reason it's not clear is because I could not make sense out of it. Just like, there is no way I can explain to you how the 12,209 will match for the Treta Yuga of the 24th Manvantara period, so yes, I think what you're suggesting is good, but until that research happens, somebody does it, okay, we have something based on the Valmiki Ramayana. We have every reason to accept that as a tentative
correct,
thing for now.
correct.
We can change that. Sanatana Vedic Dharma is Sanatana Nitya Nutana. It is capable of changing with a new evidence. So
No,
we can
at
do that.
least by deliberating philosophically like this, at least we're on the
Mhm.
right path in humanity, trying to add value.
Correct.
That's the biggest thing we
Correct.
have, because what research you have done is simply amazing, and your presentations see a lot of things which are so positive. So thank you, Nilesh ji, for this show, and thank you for the viewers. We have more than 2,000 people watching. And so all of you, thank you for staying late. And this is your second show of the day, so it was too much for you for a Friday morning.
Right.
So you're gonna have rest of the day and enjoy, eat, sleep, and be merry. Namaskar. Thank you.